Charles, it's the morning edition, but it's still Sunday, and we're still with Charles. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm in an undisclosed location in Europe now, getting some errands done that I could not accomplish in Asia.
That's good.
And I have to report that, the European path that they've been on with this European Union is like dedicating yourself, determining that you're an alcoholic and dedicating yourself to drinking as much gin as possible. I mean, it's this. I've been coming to Europe since 1970, and there were moments, I'd say, especially in the 90s and the 00s, when
Yeah.
Europe was doing well. And it was interesting and it was promising. And all the arguments they would make is that if you add up the populations of all the European countries, it's greater than the US.
Right.
There's more wealth in Europe than there is in the US, across all the many European, all the arguments why and there's more style and class and history and all this bullshit. Now it's just like, it strikes me, where I am is very similar to New York, with thugs and beggars and filth and, they don't say for rent, they say, I think, to let.
Oh, you're telling people where you are, Charles.
Well, I'm saying across Europe, they say to let.
Huh.
The equivalent, and it's the I is silent in toilet, because it's becoming one big fucking toilet bowl. I mean, they have open borders, they have excruciatingly high taxes, they have government sectors across most of the European countries that are Western European. The government's share is way too high a percentage of the economy. No sensible private sector, fleet of foot promising company is concentrating assets and hiring employees in these countries, because it's very expensive to fire them, and it's very expensive to pay them, and all this kind of stuff. So a headline level comparison of Europe and Asia is that Europe is, what was that store in Boston that was a discount store that I think went out of business?
Filene's Basement.
Yeah, this is Maxwell sub basement, and across Asia. I mean, I was really struck. Now that I'm not there anymore, I can say I was in places as big as Jakarta and Surabaya, which are two big cities in Indonesia. But I was in a smaller town. I was in Borneo, in a town called Kuching, which is a pretty big town. And the airport in Kuching, in many ways, and even in Penang, the airport is much nicer, much easier to deal with than airports here in Europe. And these airports have been around for a lot longer, in some cases as global clearinghouse airports. And they're just run down, and they stink, and they're filthy.
Yeah.
And they have the same problem when you get out of homeless people. I mean, it's the people who are walking around giving themselves participation trophies and speaking at the World Economic Forum, and charting a new path forward that's, quote, sustainable, and all the buzzwords that are important at the moment. These people belong in the loony bins that have been opened up across the poor countries of the world, so that the insane people can rush across our southern and northern border and vote. This is insane people gone wild. And on that subject, I'm going to say something indelicate, which I may get in trouble for, but I don't care. I've been on Twitter when I talk about Haha and Waltz and the other people in the mix on the other team. I often put in the hashtag idiots are smarter. Now,
Yeah.
Trump, they're trying to say that Trump is in trouble because he called Joe Biden a retard. And I sent an email around to our close friends saying, actually, in this case, Trump is wrong, because I have a new hashtag, retards are smart. I mean, and I have sympathy for people, and actually I have admiration for people who raise children who are mentally challenged, because across the entire spectrum of life is a privilege, and life can be enjoyed whether you're a genius or, let's just say, an idiot like Kamala and Hillary and Barack and all these idiots who trying to pretend that they through a lifetime of public service, the Obamas now only have $4 mega million mansions.
Yeah, no, this is saying that Trump had to be talked out of it. I haven't heard him say that. Donald Trump campaign has been forced to deny reports the former president wanted to call Joe Biden a retard. Yeah, he didn't do it. He just wanted to, according to this. Retarded Joe Biden.
Well, did you see what he just did? I just sent you an email. He was somewhere, I guess, yesterday, and he got off the plane at the airport, and they had something ready for him to go to, and he just kept on walking down the tarmac.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Joe Biden is an embarrassment. The other thing that was pretty stupid, Charles, was Kamala Harris on Saturday Night Live. It was just absolutely awful from a humor standpoint, I mean, it was just a fail all around, in my opinion.
Yeah, I had my paternal grandfather's first name was Ralph. And we all, I watched that thing, and I was I'm in a hotel, so I didn't want to Ralph in my own hotel room. But I mean, it was, I don't have any experience actually in mainstream, comedy shows or anything like that. But I can imagine what the process would be like. And you would know much more about this. That the people who are charged with putting out comedic material are smart and funny typically. And I just can't believe that the sketches they aired were endorsed by the real comedic writers. And there are some good ones in SNL. I can't. It was beyond cringeworthy. It was just not funny. The only person who was funny,
not funny,
was Dana Carvey playing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But the thing about that, Jason, is that that's not very funny at heart and substantively, because it is crystal clear. And I'm not a medical person. I'm certainly not a psychiatrist, but it's crystal clear to me, as somebody who's run businesses and been on boards of businesses, crystal clear that long ago Joe Biden should have been removed from office one way or another. If he wouldn't go willingly, invoke the 25th Amendment, but he probably would have gone willingly, if a pardon could be engineered for him and for his family and for Hunter. But, it's just this Dana Carvey is, I think, more sentient in the role than Joe Biden is in the presidency. I mean, do you really believe, does anybody really believe that the hapless team of what's her name, Hee Haw and Biden are actually taking in the complexities of what's going on in the Middle East now, of what's going on in China, of the implications of these job numbers? Here she is on Saturday Night Live. The jobs report was atrocious. I mean, remember, this is the team that's been trying to tout Bidenomics. You can't. People like to equate public sector jobs and private sector jobs. Private sector jobs, in the main, in real companies, they're competing across 200 countries if they're big companies, or certainly across 40 of the biggest economies. And it's not like the other competitors are saying, "Oh yeah, it's okay if you take business away from me. Yeah, I don't mind." It's tough competition. And it's the private sector, not just because I come out of that, but it's the private sector by math that keeps the public sector afloat. And the public sector in the United States and in most of the Western, quote, advanced economies it needs to be X'd. It needs to be cut by 80%. It really does. And it's not just to go after public sector people because I don't like the cut of their gibbets. No, we just can't afford this, particularly when it is clear, that X is running better with 20% of the headcount that it had pre-Musk. If they can do that with X, imagine what you could do if it were your own money and you said to the country at large, here's the deal. If you come up with a credible way to streamline federal government, it's going to go. You send your suggestions into a suggestion box. If we implement the suggestion, we will, because it's in our interest to get these suggestions. We'll give you a cash bonus. The government, it saves $1 billion. We'll write you a check for $10 million. You don't think that around the country, the very same people who are inventing, ring and Dupuytren's contraction medicine or whatever that is, the stupid ideas that are on TV, a number of very smart people are going to come up with ideas to cut the cost of government and pay down our debt, reduce your taxes, let you keep more of your own money and have this economy hum, fully aware that it's going to take Europe 5 centuries to get to the same place. They're addicted to government. And so a lot of this, the companies that have had it with Europe are going to come flooding into the United States.
What do you think about
Under
Ron
Trump.
Paul joining Elon Musk in this task of making the government more efficient?
Yeah, I just hope, I really hope that we don't start seeing, Elon Musk in commercials advertising, you can get gold coins.
I don't think he's going to advertise anything except maybe
I know.
Tesla. But
let's hope.
This could be good. I mean, yeah, Ron Paul, he basically said he wants to join Elon Musk. And then Elon Musk said, yeah, that's cool. And now everybody, yeah.
Yeah, Ron Paul has a lot of very enthusiastic supporters who do vote.
Yes, he does.
And one thing, we should talk a little bit in this first segment about Tucker Carlson's recent show. And with that, what was the guy's name? Stefan and some long name. I forget what it is.
Yeah, I forget his last name. He's a lawyer.
I don't know if you could pull up a link or, but the point is this is about an hour and 45 minutes that I'm jet lagged as hell. And I watched this morning, early my time. And I don't really have a lot of time. It may sound silly for me to say it, but I don't have a lot of time to watch, 2-hour podcasts. But I couldn't stop watching this thing. And it was very interesting because this guy seems level-headed. And the story that he's telling, the whole idea that the bar associations and the public, quote, servants try to tell us is that, theirs is the noble profession. Seeking profit is not. And you can count on these noble public servants to be non-political and to understand that the scales of justice have to be balanced and Lady Justice has to be blind and all this bullshit that you hear out of, the super expensive law schools where the law professors seem to be spending all their time trying to get consulting assignments and outside gigs and are very happy in their university housing, which is subsidized, and their fancy salaries. But what I see is a justice system, particularly yours is a series of test cases that has been weaponized against critics, reasonable critics. And most of all, it's been weaponized against people who are prepared to stand up and expose the corrupt nature of the status quo. And it's, to see a guy like this, who does not come across to me, I've met many lawyers in life, who are hard asses and have to let you know how tough they are in the first paragraph. He doesn't seem to be like that. He seems to be a reasonable guy who's modest, who the system attempted to destroy, and the system has failed. But this guy, the first interview he's ever given is this one with Tucker.
Wow.
And I
Stefan Positano, his name is. Whoa, it's up to 2.7 million views already.
Yeah, I mean, I would really commend our viewership, or suggest to our viewership, that they take the time and watch this and think about it. And if we can help this guy out, we should help him out. I mean, this is a guy who's now said he's going to spend the rest of his time on Earth, when he's active, fighting lawfare and fighting people like Weissman, whom he specifically mentions in this video.
And he said he's already suing Weissman for defamation. This guy was representing Cassidy Hudson. What's her name? Cassidy Hutchinson. Right. And she basically set him up to get him disbarred and criminally prosecuted, seemingly, and I agree with his conclusion, just because any lawyer who would represent Trump, and I mean, frankly, any Trump supporter as well, they want to make it impossible for you to get a lawyer. This is exactly what George's brother did to me. Bar complaints against Larry. This is all of these people involved in this need to be exposed and disbarred and prosecuted harshly. I'm talking about Caproni, Weissman,
Weissman especially.
Yeah,
Well,
Eisen, Ben Witties.
And, one of the tricks of their trade is abusing nonprofits.
Yeah.
In the case of Weissman, I don't know if he's paid, but he's maybe getting expenses or at least availing himself of office space and classroom space at NYU Law School, isn't he?
Absolutely. He is getting paid. He's a professor there. I would presume he's paid. He's not doing it for free.
Well, NYU is a public charity, as is Harvard, as are all these big brand name schools that are in the business of getting the John Paulsons of this world to write $100 million checks so they can increase the tuition costs and pay people like Weissman, if he's paid, and others over the top amounts of money. This is not a public charity. And he talks about something called 65 Lawyers or something. It's some kind of association.
Project 65. I think that's Elias, isn't it?
It might be. And, they're using that organization to basically further to further one political party over another. That is not a public charity. If it is, I don't know if the 65 thing is a public charity, but certainly these, I'm hoping, and I'm not going to reveal why I know this on air, but I am hoping that a central plank, should Trump win here, of the Musk Doge plan is to just simply enforce the laws pertaining to charities and the regulations that are on the books. So all you have to do, you have to figure out why they're not being enforced and who's behind that plan. Why was Lois Lerner outed? What was really going on with Lois Lerner? That needs to be figured out. But I think there's some very powerful tools that could be applied to change the tenor of, public charities, so as to say universities in particular, and presidential foundations, other influence-shaping operations, and also the mainstream media. People who are getting FCC, who are making profits off free FCC licenses because what they're doing is supposedly in the public interest, when they're nothing more than an unpaid arm of the Democratic Party. I mean, that's got to change. And examples need to be made. I mean, I don't know if you remember this little Philip that's coming to my mind now, that in the whole January 6th fairy tale, and this man, Stefan, makes excellent points that the January 6th committee is illegitimate, something the Supreme Court needs to get into. But the January 6th legislative branch of government, the subcommittee or the committee of the legislative branch, was engaged and still is engaged, those who are covering all this stuff up, in a process to abuse the judicial branch and abuse the rights of the January 6th, quote, defendants and people like this lawyer, to have an unconstitutional process where legislators don't refer the prosecution to the justice branch. They take it upon themselves, and they use subcontractors and these nonprofits and law firms and other shadowy actors to persecute, and indeed, in this case, to try to destroy the life of a political opponent. This is beyond outrageous. Liz Cheney, she survived, I suppose, hunting trips with her father, so that's not a threat. But I mean, she should be disbarred and criminally prosecuted.
Well, and
she
that's
is a
what
criminal.
Positano said, that he's got a bar complaint against her. But yeah, right. I mean, it's like dueling bar complaints. And by the way, the lawyers getting bar complaints, this was a big issue with Larry, because they just keep, by they, I mean George's brother, keep filing these bar complaints, and Larry had to hire attorneys to represent him with the bar, and it was costing thousands of dollars. And I mean, setting aside the fact that it's unfair and it's upsetting because some of these people are our friends or associates or whatever, it denies everybody access to justice because it jams up the courts with all this nonsense.
Right. And, there is, it's interesting, there are abuses in the English system, but there are a few things that are interesting to me. And one is that obviously the English collection of settled cases is, a millennium or more long, right? So there are a lot more settled legal principles that, you can't have a spurious claim. You submit something that's been settled and you get your ass handed to you as a lawyer, if not kicked out of the profession. The other thing is, and I don't know how I feel about the loser pays approach, but in England, there is a loser pays approach. So if which tends to moderate the practice of spurious claims. So it also tends to help wealthy people. And so you got to balance those two things off. But yeah, I mean, where we are as a nation now with bad comedians pretending that democracy is at stake under Trump, right? Where is the evidence for that? I mean, we know under the Biden-Harris administration, Bannon just got out of prison. Navarro went to prison. These are two senior presidential level appointees who were thrown in prison in bullshit referrals by crooked people, when Eric Holder, who should still be in prison and never even faced prison, was cited for contempt when he was Attorney General by Congress. He wasn't put in prison, right? But he is, I believe, close to Weissman and certainly close to Obama, and so he's part of the team, Eric Holder, who's, the law is for thee, it's not for me. And that principle, Lord help us if they try or they succeed in concocting as reality the fiction that Harris and Waltz are going to win this thing. I mean, I cannot. The way I'm looking at this is this should be a landslide victory. It should be a case, and I don't know precisely. I haven't looked at House districts, district by district, and Senate races, race by race. But the mainstream is floating the idea that it's likely Republicans are going to get 52 Senate seats, so they'll control the Senate. House is difficult to figure. People are all over the map on that. My view is it could be more like 54, 55, 57 seats if the election's legitimate. And, in these different Senate and state races. And in the House, it should be 25 to 50. I mean, I didn't realize that Jake Sullivan's wife is running. How do they accomplish this? Because I believe Jake lives in Washington, D.C., and I think they're married. So how this woman can run for Congress in New Hampshire. There's a delicious debate clip of Jake Sullivan's wife just getting torn to shreds by this tiger lady who can't really speak English that well, but is very effective destroying Jake Sullivan's wife. I mean, just reducing her to tatters. It's a spit roasting, I would say. It's brutal what she did to this woman. And so I don't know, the Trump coattail effect, if it really becomes more like a landslide, and remember, in the Reagan case, I remember thinking about this because I was really concerned Carter would get reelected at the beginning of my career. All the know-it-alls, all the pundits were saying, oh, no, Carter has the advantage of incumbency. Reagan's just an actor. Reagan kicked some Carter ass, man. I don't think Jimmy Carter has been able to sit down ever since. I mean, it was brutal. And then the 84 against whoever he ran against in 84, Mondale was even rougher.
Yeah.
Right. In both cases, those were 500, I think, electoral votes. B-Rock in 2012 only got 339 votes, electoral votes. So, in a case where Trump, before we get to cheating, in a case where Trump, there's a count of legitimate votes, there's no non-citizens involved, there's no vote switching using Dominion or other machines. In a case where he gets 400 plus electoral college votes, I would argue the Senate's going to be more like, as I say, 54, 55, maybe 56 or 7, and up 25, up 50 in the House. And that's a clear mandate. Then we get to cheating. And of course, all the wise guys are saying, well, you never know. The vote counting is going to take more time, according to the New York Times and other destroyed remnants of the lamestream legacy press. They're trying to say, well, we won't be able to have a decision for a long time,
It's ridiculous.
And Raskin, who of course, how he became the chief clown of the Democratic Party. I guess Schiff was too busy running for office. They're out saying, well, even if Trump, if the voters are so stupid as to say that Trump won, he's not constitutionally eligible, they're going to try to say, to actually serve out his term because he's going to be convicted. He's going to be sentenced as a felon in November. And then they're going to say...
No, they said it was because he did an insurrection, is what I heard Raskin say.
Well, I was getting to that. So on the one hand, they're going to say he's a felon, and next they're going to say that he's also an insurrectionist and cite that arcane law, which really pertained to the Civil War and had nothing to do with this. But they're going to try anyway. And they control the press, and they'll have all this tension. Will the Electoral College certify yes or no? Will the Senate confirm yes or no? All this kind of stuff. And so we'll have uncertainty. And in the uncertainty, we'll also have, the waning days of this disastrous administration. We'll have conflicts probably in the Middle East. Who knows what happens in Ukraine and Taiwan. And there'll be all these, these noble calls on Trump for the good of the country. Why don't you just put country above your petty political interests and, step aside? And we have a new generation of leadership in Hee-Haw Harris and Tampon Tim. I mean, you could have, and there are some pretty smart people who are calling for this to happen. You could have a period of great uncertainty, not unlike the 2000 election. Now I was still working then and spending a lot of time in Ireland. And, we were all riveted after work to TV of what the hell was going on with these dueling press conferences of American flags of Gore and Bush. And we really looked stupid as a country.
Yeah.
For the protracted period when
dangling chads.
Yeah, and Hillary was talking about W was selected, not elected.
Now, Charles, we are at the end of our time here on the free portion of the show, and we're going to continue in the First Amendment Forum where the sponsors will be able to join us. If you aren't a sponsor, please become one. Visit odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Thanks for watching.